The Voseri had long considered themselves the superior race, their advanced technology and rigid social order granting them a sense of destiny that bordered on arrogance. For centuries, they had surveyed the cosmos, cataloging the various alien civilizations that dotted the galaxy, each one inferior to their own in one way or another. But when the Vosari made first contact with the primitive human race, their confidence quickly turned to disdain. The humans, with their petty squabbles and archaic methods of warfare, were hardly worthy of the Vosari's attention. They were a backwater species, barely clinging to the fringes of interstellar exploration, utterly unprepared for the might of the Vosari Empire. Or so the Vosari thought. Avery Sinclair was a young human diplomat, one of the few representatives tasked with establishing meaningful dialogue between Earth and the alien visitors. As he stood in the grand audience chamber of the Vosari mothership, his palms grew sweaty, his heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and determination. The Vosari commander, a towering figure with piercing red eyes and a regal bearing, fixed Avery with an imperious gaze. "Human," he rumbled, his voice resonating with a deep, unsettling timbre. "Your kind have shown us nothing but violence and chaos. Why should we not simply eradicate you and be done with it?" Avery took a steadying breath, refusing to be cowed by the alien's condescending tone. "Honored Vosari," he began, "I understand your concerns, but I assure you that humanity is more than just a violent species. We have the capacity for great innovation, for cooperation, and for peaceful coexistence." The commander let out a derisive snort. "Your wars, your petty squabbles, your inability to govern yourselves, these are the only traits we have observed in your kind. You are unfit to join the galactic community." Avery clenched his fists, fighting the urge to lash out. "That may be true of some humans, but not all of us. We are a diverse and complex civilization, with a rich cultural heritage and a profound capacity for growth. Given the chance, we can prove our worth to you and the rest of the galaxy." The commander's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, Avery feared he had overstepped. But then, to his surprise, the alien's expression softened ever so slightly. "Very well, human," the commander said, his tone less dismissive than before. "We will observe your kind, and if you can demonstrate your worth, perhaps we will reconsider our stance. But understand this, if you prove to be as volatile and destructive as we suspect, we will not hesitate to eradicate you." Avery nodded, relief flooding through him. "Thank you, honored Vosari. You will not be disappointed." As Avery left the audience chamber, his mind raced with the implications of the commander's decision. The Vosari were clearly skeptical of humanity's capabilities, but they had agreed to at least consider the possibility that humans were more than just a primitive warlike species. It was a slim chance, but Avery knew that if humanity could just prove its worth, it could forge a new path, one that would not only ensure the survival of the human race, but also cement its place among the galactic community. With a renewed sense of purpose, Avery set out to rally his fellow humans, to prepare them for the challenges that lay ahead. The Vosari invasion was inevitable, he knew, but if they could harness the true potential of the human spirit, they just might have a chance at victory. As the days passed, Avery's message spread like wildfire, igniting a spark of hope in the hearts of people around the world. Resistance cells began to form, their members training in secret, stockpiling weapons, and honing their skills for the coming battle. And all the while, the Vosari ships continued to amass in the skies above, their commanders confident that the human race would crumble under the weight of their superior technology and tactics. But Avery knew better. He had seen the resilience, the innovation, and the sheer determination of his fellow humans, and he was convinced that the Vosari were in for a rude awakening. "They say humans are terrible at war," Avery would tell his fellow resistance fighters, his eyes gleaming with a fierce resolve. But they're about to learn the truth. The Vosari invasion of Earth began without warning, a massive fleet of sleek, silver ships descending upon the planet's major cities and military installations. The alien forces deployed legions of heavily armored soldiers, their advanced weaponry and tactical coordination overwhelming the human defenders within a matter of hours. Avery watched in horror from his hideout as the once vibrant city of New York crumbled under the relentless Vosari assault. The skies were filled with the thunderous roar of alien craft, raining down destruction upon the helpless population below. "We must act now," Avery said, turning to the ragtag group of resistance fighters who had gathered around him. "If we don't, the Vosari will crush us all." One of the fighters, a grizzled veteran named Jack, shook his head grimly. "You saw what they did to the military. We're no match for their technology and numbers." Avery understood the man's fear, but he refused to give in to despair. "That's exactly why we can't give up," he said, his voice firm and resolute. "The Vosari have underestimated us, and that's our advantage. We need to hit them where they least expect it, to show them that we're more than just a primitive species." The other fighters exchanged uncertain glances, but Avery could see the spark of determination in their eyes. They knew that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and they were willing to put everything on the line to defend their home. In the days that followed, the resistance fighters launched a series of daring guerrilla attacks against the Vosari occupation forces. They struck swiftly and with precision, using their intimate knowledge of the local terrain to their advantage. The Vosari, accustomed to the open spaces of their own homeworld, were caught off guard by the human resistance's ability to vanish into the urban landscape. As the losses mounted, the Vosari commanders grew increasingly frustrated. They had expected the humans to crumble under the weight of their superior technology, but instead they were facing a stubborn and resourceful adversary that refused to back down. "This is unacceptable," the lead Vosari commander, Thrax, roared, his crimson eyes blazing with fury. "We should have crushed these pests long ago. Redouble the efforts. I want every last human eliminated." But the more the Vosari tightened their grip, the more the resistance fighters pushed back. Avery's network of cells spread across the globe, sharing intelligence and coordinating their attacks to maximize the impact on the invading forces. In the shadows of a once bustling city, Avery met with his closest allies, mapping out their next move. "We're starting to make a dent," he said, a grim smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "The Vosari are getting sloppy, and that's exactly what we need." "It won't be enough," warned a young woman named Mara, her brow furrowed with concern. "They've got us outmatched in every way. We need something more, something that can turn the tide of this war." Avery nodded, his mind racing. "Then that's what we'll find," he said, his voice filled with determination. "There has to be a way to level the playing field, something that can give us the edge we need." As the Vosari invasion continued to ravage the planet, Avery and his fellow resistance fighters knew that time was running out. They had to find a way to turn the tables on their alien adversaries, or risk the complete annihilation of the human race. But Avery was not about to give up without a fight. He had seen the resilience and ingenuity of his fellow humans, and he was convinced that they were more than a match for the Vosari. All they needed was the right tool, the right opportunity, to unleash the true power of the human spirit. And with that thought in mind, Avery set out to uncover the secret that could tip the scales of this war in humanity's favor. As the Vosari invasion raged on, Avery and the resistance fighters continued to harass the alien occupiers, using their intimate knowledge of the local terrain to their advantage. They struck swiftly and with precision, ambushing Vosari patrols, sabotaging key infrastructure, and disrupting the flow of supplies. The Vosari commanders, increasingly frustrated by the humans' guerrilla tactics, responded with brute force, deploying more troops and authorizing the use of heavy weaponry. But no matter how much firepower they brought to bear, the resistance fighters always seemed to slip through their fingers, vanishing into the shadows before the Vosari could react. "They're like ghosts," Thrax, the lead Vosari commander, growled in frustration. "How can they evade us so easily?" One of his subordinates, a tactical officer named Xerin, studied the latest intelligence reports with a furrowed brow. It's their intimate knowledge of the terrain, combined with their ability to coordinate their attacks, he said. They're using the cities and the wilderness to their advantage, hitting us where we're most vulnerable. Thrax clenched his fist, his sharp talons digging into the palm of his hand. Then we must find a way to counter their tactics. Scour the regions where they are most active. Leave no stone unturned. I want them rooted out and eliminated, no matter the cost. Vizira nodded, already issuing the necessary orders to his subordinates. It will be done, Commander. As the Vosari forces tightened their grip on the occupied territories, Avery and his fellow resistance fighters found themselves in an increasingly precarious position. They were running low on supplies, and the Vosari's relentless pursuit was making it more and more difficult to find safe haven. We can't keep this up much longer, Mara said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. The Vosari are closing in, and we're running out of options. Avery knew she was right. The resistance had managed to inflict significant damage on the Vosari occupation forces, but it was only a matter of time before the aliens overwhelmed them. We need something more, he said, his brow furrowed in deep thought. Something that can give us the edge we need to turn the tide of this war. The other resistance fighters exchanged worried glances, but Avery could see the determination burning in their eyes. They weren't about to give up, not when the fate of humanity hung in the balance. As the group huddled around a makeshift map, poring over the latest intelligence, a glimmer of hope began to take shape. Buried deep beneath the surface of the planet, the resistance fighters had uncovered rumors of an ancient alien artifact, a weapon of immense power that had lain dormant for centuries. If we can find this artifact, we might just have a chance, Avery said, his voice filled with a renewed sense of purpose. The mission to locate and secure the artifact was fraught with danger. The Vosari had also caught wind of the artifact's existence and were racing to uncover its secrets before the resistance fighters could. It would be a perilous journey, filled with treacherous terrain, deadly traps, and the ever-present threat of Vosari pursuit. But Avery and his team were undaunted. They had come too far to back down now, and the stakes were too high to fail. As they set out on their quest, Avery couldn't help but feel a sense of trepidation. The weight of humanity's future rested squarely on their shoulders, and the outcome of this mission would determine whether the Vosari would emerge victorious, or whether the human race would rise up and reclaim its rightful place in the galaxy. They say we're terrible at war, Avery murmured, his eyes narrowing with determination. But they're about to learn the truth. With that, the resistance fighters plunged into the unknown, determined to uncover the secrets of the ancient artifact and use its power to turn the tide of the war against the Vosari invaders. The journey to the ancient alien artifact's resting place was fraught with peril. Avery and the resistance fighters navigated treacherous terrain, evading Vosari patrols and braving the harsh elements as they delved deeper into the planet's unknown regions. As they closed in on their objective, the weight of their mission grew heavier with each passing mile. The fate of humanity rested on their shoulders, and failure was not an option. Suddenly, a Vosari scouting party emerged from the shadows, their advanced weaponry trained on the resistance fighters. Avery and his team scrambled for cover, but they were vastly outmatched in firepower. We can't let them reach the artifact first, Mara shouted, her eyes wild with determination. Avery knew she was right. If the Vosari gained control of the ancient weapon, all hope for humanity would be lost. Without hesitation, he rallied his teammates, leading them in a desperate charge against the alien forces. The ensuing battle was fierce and chaotic, with both sides fighting tooth and nail for the upper hand. Avery and his fighters used their agility and guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the Vosari, but the aliens' superior firepower threatened to overwhelm them. Just as Avery feared they would be overrun, a massive tremor shook the ground, causing the Vosari to stumble and lose their footing. Seizing the opportunity, the resistance fighters pressed their attack, driving the aliens back and regaining the upper hand. As the dust settled, Avery and his team pressed on, their resolve strengthened by the unexpected turn of events. They knew that the Vosari would not be deterred, and that they had to reach the artifact before their adversaries. The final leg of the journey proved to be the most treacherous. The artifact's resting place was guarded by an intricate network of traps and security measures designed to keep intruders at bay. Avery and his team meticulously navigated these obstacles, relying on their wits and their teamwork to overcome each challenge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the inner sanctum, where the ancient artifact lay dormant, its hidden power pulsing with a strange, otherworldly energy. Avery and his teammates stood in awe, their eyes wide with wonder and trepidation. They had come so far, risked so much, to reach this moment, and now they held the key to humanity's salvation, or its downfall. Cautiously, Avery approached the artifact, his hand trembling as he reached out to touch its surface. Suddenly, a brilliant light erupted from the device, engulfing the room in a dazzling display of power. The resistance fighters shielded their eyes, unsure of what was happening. But as the light faded, they realized that the artifact had responded to Avery's touch and that its power had been unlocked. Incredible, Mara breathed, her voice laced with a mix of awe and disbelief. Avery turned to his teammates, his expression resolute. "This is it," he said, his voice steady and unwavering. "We have the key to turning the tide of this war. Now we need to put it to use." As the Vosari forces closed in, Avery and his team prepared to harness the power of the ancient artifact, determined to use it to strike a decisive blow against their alien adversaries. They knew that the fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they were ready to do whatever it took to secure victory. "They say we're terrible at war," Avery said, his eyes gleaming with a fierce determination. "But they're about to learn the truth." With that, the resistance fighters braced themselves for the final showdown, their newfound weapon in hand, and their resolve unbreakable. The power of the ancient artifact coursed through Avery's veins, filling him with a sense of purpose and determination that he had never known before. As he and the resistance fighters emerged from the hidden sanctum, they were met with a sight that sent chills down their spines. The Vosari forces had converged on their position, their ranks swelling with wave after wave of heavily armored soldiers and advanced weaponry. Thrax, the lead Vosari commander, stood at the forefront, his crimson eyes narrowed with a mixture of arrogance and disdain. "So, the humans have finally revealed their true colors," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "Do you really think that your primitive technology can stand against the might of the Vosari Empire?" Avery stepped forward, his grip tightening on the artifact's pulsing surface. "We're about to find out," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. Without warning, Avery unleashed the artifact's power, a brilliant burst of energy erupting from its core and engulfing the Vosari forces in a blinding display of light. The alien soldiers were caught off guard, their advanced weaponry rendered useless by the artifact's devastating effect. Thrax watched in horror as his troops were decimated, his confidence rapidly giving way to panic. "Impossible," he roared, his claws digging into the fabric of his uniform. "How can this be?" Avery and the resistance fighters seized the opportunity, launching a coordinated assault on the Vosari commander's position. With the artifact's power coursing through them, they were able to overwhelm the alien forces with unparalleled speed and precision, leaving Thrax and his remaining troops no choice but to retreat. As the Vosari forces retreated, Avery and his team surveyed the aftermath of the battle, their hearts racing with a mixture of exhilaration and disbelief. "We did it," Mara breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. "We actually did it." Avery nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "This is just the beginning," he said, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. "The Vosari will regroup, and they'll be back with a vengeance." The other resistance fighters knew he was right. The battle had been a decisive victory, but the war was far from over. The Vosari were a formidable foe, and they would stop at nothing to crush the human resistance and assert their dominance over the planet. But Avery refused to be daunted. He had witnessed the power of the ancient artifact, and he knew that it held the key to humanity's salvation. With this newfound weapon, they stood a chance of turning the tide of the war and ultimately defeating the Vosari invaders. "We need to regroup, resupply, and prepare for the next assault," Avery said, his eyes narrowing with determination. "The Vosari may have underestimated us, but they won't make that mistake again." The resistance fighters nodded in agreement, their spirits buoyed by the success of their mission. They knew that the road ahead would be long and arduous, but they were more determined than ever to see this fight through to the end. As they set about their preparations, Avery couldn't help but reflect on the events that had led them to this moment. The Vosari had thought that humanity was a backwater species, incapable of standing up to their might. But now, they were about to learn the truth, that the human race was a force to be reckoned with, a resilient and adaptable species that refused to be subjugated. "They say we're terrible at war," Avery murmured, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "But they're about to learn just how wrong they are." With the power of the ancient artifact at their disposal, Avery and the resistance fighters knew that they were on the cusp of something extraordinary. The fate of humanity hung in the balance, and they were determined to rise to the challenge, no matter the cost. In the aftermath of their decisive victory against the Vosari forces, Avery and the resistance fighters knew that they had to move quickly. The alien invaders would not be deterred for long, and they would undoubtedly return with even greater numbers and more advanced weaponry. As the group convened to discuss their next steps, Avery's mind raced with the implications of the ancient artifact's power. He had witnessed firsthand the devastating effect it had on the Vosari troops, and he couldn't help but wonder if there was more to the device than met the eye. "We need to understand this thing better," he said, his brow furrowed in deep thought. "There has to be a way to harness its power even more effectively." Mara, who had been studying the artifact intently, nodded in agreement. "I've been running some tests, and it seems like the artifact is responding to the unique energy signatures of the human body. Something about our biology is allowing us to tap into its power in a way the Vosari can't." Avery's eyes widened with realization. "Then that means we have an advantage that the Vosari can't replicate," he said, a glimmer of hope sparking in his chest. The other resistance fighters exchanged a series of excited glances, their spirits buoyed by the prospect of wielding such a powerful weapon against their alien adversaries. "If we can figure out how to control the artifact's power, we might just have a chance at winning this war," Avery continued, his voice filled with determination. The group immediately set to work, poring over every scrap of information they could find about the ancient device. They studied its intricate mechanisms, analyzed the energy patterns it emitted, and experimented with various methods of channeling its power. As the days turned into weeks, the resistance fighters made steady progress, each breakthrough bringing them closer to mastering the artifact's secrets. Avery could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he refused to be daunted by the challenge. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they'd made a breakthrough. By tapping into the artifact's core, they discovered a way to amplify its power, harnessing the unique properties of the human body to create a devastating weapon that could turn the tide of the war. "This is it," Avery said, his eyes shining with triumph. "We're ready to take the fight to the Vosari." With the enhanced artifact in their possession, the resistance fighters launched a series of daring strikes against the Vosari occupation forces. They hit the alien invaders with lightning-fast precision, overwhelming their defenses and sowing chaos in their ranks. The Vosari, once confident in their technological superiority, were caught off guard by the humans' newfound power. Thrax, the lead commander, watched in horror as his troops were decimated, their advanced weaponry rendered useless against the artifact's devastating energy. "Impossible," he roared, his claws tearing at the fabric of his uniform. "How can these primitives possess such power?" Avery and the resistance fighters pressed their advantage, relentlessly harassing the Vosari forces and denying them any chance to regroup. The alien invaders were in full retreat, their once formidable grip on the planet slipping through their fingers. As the tide of the war began to turn, Avery couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. The Vosari had underestimated the human race, dismissing us as a primitive and violent species unworthy of their attention. But now, they were about to learn the truth, that the human spirit, when pushed to the brink, was a force to be reckoned with. With the power of the ancient artifact at their fingertips, Avery and his fellow resistance fighters were poised to shatter the Vosari's dreams of conquest and forge a new path for humanity. "They say we're terrible at war," Avery murmured, a fierce determination burning in his eyes. "But they're about to learn just how wrong they are." As the Vosari forces continued their retreat, Avery and his team prepared for the final showdown, their resolve unshakable and their weapons primed for the ultimate test. The Vosari retreat was a chaotic and disorganized affair as the alien invaders scrambled to escape the relentless onslaught of the human resistance. Avery and his team pressed their advantage, harrying the retreating forces with the power of the ancient artifact, inflicting devastating losses and shattering the Vosari's once invincible grip on the planet. As the Vosari ships flooded into the sky, Avery and his fellow fighters let out a collective cheer, their spirits soaring with the knowledge that they had turned the tide of the war. "We did it," Mara exclaimed, her eyes shining with triumph. "We actually did it." Avery clasped her shoulder, a proud smile on his face. "No, we did it," he said, his voice filled with a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. "This is a victory for all of humanity." The other resistance fighters gathered around, their faces alight with a renewed sense of hope and determination. They had faced overwhelming odds, and they had emerged victorious, a testament to the resilience and ingenuity of the human spirit. But even as they celebrated their triumph, Avery couldn't shake the feeling that the war was far from over. The Vosari were a formidable foe, and he knew that they would not give up without a fight. "We can't let our guard down," he said, his brow furrowing with concern. "The Vosari will be back, and they'll be even more determined to crush us." The other fighters nodded, their expressions sobering as they realized the gravity of the situation. They had won a battle, but the war was far from over, and they would need to be prepared for whatever the Vosari had in store. Avery knew that they would need to regroup, to resupply, and to strengthen their defenses in preparation for the Vosari's inevitable counterattack. They had proven that they could match the alien invaders' power, but they would need to be even more coordinated, even more strategic, if they were to emerge victorious. As the resistance fighters set about their preparations, Avery couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them to this point. It had been a harrowing and grueling experience, filled with challenges and setbacks that had tested the very limits of their determination and resolve. But through it all, they had persevered, driven by a shared belief in the power of the human spirit and the conviction that they were more than just a primitive warlike species. They had proven the Vosari wrong, and in doing so, they had laid the foundation for a new era of human dominance in the galaxy. "They said we were terrible at war," Avery murmured, his eyes fixed on the horizon. But they were wrong. As the days turned into weeks, the resistance fighters worked tirelessly to fortify their defenses and prepare for the Vosari's return. They knew that the battle ahead would be fierce, but they were determined to stand their ground and fight for the future of humanity. Finally, the Vosari forces emerged, their ships darkening the skies and their armies pouring down upon the planet's surface. Avery and his team braced themselves, their hands gripping the ancient artifact with a newfound sense of power and purpose. The ensuing battle was a brutal and bloody affair, with both sides fighting with a ferocity that shook the very foundations of the planet. But as the fight raged on, Avery and his fellow resistance fighters began to gain the upper hand, their superior coordination and the artifact's devastating power tipping the scales in their favor. Thrax, the Vosari commander, watched in horror as his forces were decimated, his grip on the planet slipping away. In a final desperate act, he ordered a full retreat, his once mighty army in tatters. As the Vosari ships disappeared into the sky, Avery and his team let out a collective sigh of relief, their weary bodies and spirits buoyed by the knowledge that they had achieved the impossible. "We did it," Avery said, his voice tinged with awe and disbelief. "We actually did it." The resistance fighters erupted into cheers and celebrations, their triumph over the Vosari invaders a testament to the power of the human spirit and the unbreakable determination of those who fight for the future of their home. As the dust settled and the Vosari forces retreated, the human resistance fighters found themselves in a state of bittersweet triumph. They had achieved the unthinkable, defeating the alien invaders and reclaiming their home planet. But the path to this victory had been paved with sacrifice and hardship. Avery stood amidst the ruins of what was once a thriving city, his eyes scanning the devastation that surrounded him. The streets were littered with the debris of battle, a grim reminder of the heavy toll this war had taken on his people. But even in the midst of this sorrow, there was a glimmer of hope. Across the planet, the human spirit had been ignited, and the survivors were already coming together to rebuild and restore what had been lost. "We did it," Avery said, his voice filled with a mixture of pride and exhaustion. "We showed the Vosari that we're more than just a primitive species. We're a force to be reckoned with." Mara, who had stood by his side throughout the entire ordeal, placed a hand on his shoulder. "And now we have the chance to show the rest of the galaxy what we're made of," she said, her eyes shining with determination. Avery nodded, his mind already racing with the implications of their victory. The Vosari had made the mistake of underestimating the human race, and now they would have to contend with the consequences of their folly. As the resistance fighters began the arduous task of rebuilding and regaining their footing, Avery took on the mantle of leadership, guiding his people through the challenges that lay ahead. He knew that the road to recovery would be long and difficult, but he was determined to see it through, no matter the cost. Under Avery's direction, the human settlement began to take shape, rising from the ashes of the Vosari occupation. The ancient artifact, which had played such a pivotal role in their victory, was carefully integrated into the new infrastructure, its power harnessed to power the rebuilding efforts and ensure the security of the colony. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, Avery watched with a sense of pride and wonder as the human settlement flourished. The people, once battered and bruised by the ravages of war, had found a new sense of purpose and determination, working tirelessly to create a future that was truly their own. And at the heart of it all was the ancient artifact, its power seamlessly woven into the fabric of the colony. Avery had come to see the device not merely as a weapon, but as a symbol of the human race's resilience and ingenuity, a testament to the boundless potential that lay within each and every one of them. "They said we were terrible at war," Avery murmured, his gaze fixed on the horizon. But they were wrong. As the human colony continued to grow and thrive, Avery's reputation as a respected leader and visionary grew, and he found himself at the forefront of a new chapter in human history. No longer were they the backwater species that the Vosari had so carelessly dismissed. They were a force to be reckoned with, a people who had proven their worth on the galactic stage. And Avery knew that this was just the beginning. With the Vosari's retreat, the door had been opened for humanity to forge new alliances, to explore the vast expanse of the cosmos, and to claim their rightful place among the stars. As he stood atop the tallest structure in the colony, gazing out at the horizon, Avery couldn't help but feel a sense of awe and wonder. The journey had been long and arduous, but they had emerged victorious, and the future that lay before them was filled with endless possibilities. "They said we were terrible at war," Avery said, a smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. But they were about to learn the truth. With that, he turned and rejoined his people, his steps filled with a renewed sense of purpose and determination. The war may have been won, but the true battle for the future of humanity had only just begun.